in substance, when I look at Buckingham Palace, it reminds me to socialism. Probably the timing. I don't know. Maybe is it because we have been watching all of these movies in relation to Second World War, are also very much in preference to stay in that time after Second World War. Most of the old generation, which is still in power there, and still controlling very much the entire Englishness, is very much after Second World War generation, live in that time. But monarchy itself, the building itself, reminds me to socialism. It reminds me to that kind of larger community. And there is some kind of sense of some kind of cold directive, or probably even the one that would be living in the protocol would be found themselves subordinated to it. Some kind of detachment from the directorship even. Extremely well organized and extremely directive driven. And even if it comes with some kind of privileges or sense of some kind of status, as I certainly was having it my entire life, it comes with that sense of such superb or supreme organization that at some point make you to find yourself in the state of, in Serb, that would be the word strahopoštovanja, and that is fear respectful, respectful to the point of fear, of being afraid. Like when you go in church, for example, I feel like so small and little, and you're respectful to the point of being afraid of unknown. Well, that is that sense we were having. I was having it in socialism as well, because it was very centralized or very organized society, but also very centered, and that would make you to appreciate it like a puppy, because it provides you education, free education, for Medicare, certain lifestyle in the 70s and 80s. It was nice dressing code, but certainly in my family I could have afforded it. It was, but there was a cold, more like lizardian approach, with some kind of coldness attached to it. And some sixth sense of that coldness that made you to be always a bit withdrawn and drive on the safe road. So that is how I see monarchy of England. So would I like to return there? Excuse me. It doesn't look to me anything of that much attractive. I'm in some kind of journey of discovering things, noticing things. I have just noticed, for example, how similar is entire Englishness with Serbia. And no matter what, socialism of our territories was very much Serb-driven or Serb-centered. And when you say British influenced, the common denominator here is Serb-centered, which I am just discovering. And then I'm discovering the variations of it. As for example, the movie Ryan's Daughter is a Serb teacher, very much withdrawn, gentle, vulnerable, cold-blooded, yes, but not that much involved either. And then you question yourself, if there is that kind of centralized order, who is actually arranging it? I'm not being convinced that although it is Serb-infused, it is also Serb-orchestrated. It is like directorship is somewhere else. Oh, these are the corridors where I now flotate today. I don't have some specific desire, part of very often jumping in my own mental limbo space. In my translation of that entire historic heritage, recognizing my kind in it and trying to, I don't know, notice things. Just notice things. Just noticing. I'm just living the time as any one of you, and I don't have clear wish list. Certainly not to jump in that kind of building. Let's be clear. How I would see that is delivering my own stamp within such historic heritage on such kind of basis. Delivering my tower of answers. That's my that's basically what I do anyway. Although it is not exactly configured finally, and it is more like introductory, and I'm here attacked by all sorts of opposition. I'm more like in a battlefield than a statement house. But I certainly have built my own statement house, my own tower. So I would certainly not admit myself in the previous. I am driving on my corridors. And obviously it is going too much ahead of its time. But I have charted something here. It reminds me as of the movie I'm watching with my husband today is Gilded Time or something like that, where it was about these mega capitalist dreamers that were dreaming of building a railway all across America after steam machine was invented. It was that time like, wow, so much opportunity about the dreamers and the investors and risk takers, adventurers of the time. I feel that my work falls in that category, where now the previous belief systems are gradually weakening, where we are questioning more, we are departing from much more rigid religious submission, where we speak about freedom and threat to our freedom and our sense of personal freedom more and more. I find equally my quadrum of questions and answers, and that's what I'm doing. I'm living my time. I'm doing my own awakening, not charted by someone else, although that was the intention, but taking my own identity in my hands and playing artist on my own call. And it was certainly not so much any kind of super simple Cinderella story. And certainly I have, even in my 20s, I have not been anything of naive, let aside, simple, let aside today. And even if someone preferred to think of what I do like that, that is that someone preferred to think like that rather than being like that. yeah, it might be going a bit too much ahead of its time, although usually that is how it happens. It is ahead of its time. That is why it is frontier of something. It is ahead of something because it is ahead of its time. Otherwise, it would not be called like that. Based on analysis of the previous, of course, based on a learned lecture or recognized something new, moving the boundaries of unknown, reforming or providing ground to move from the past into the future, being humane enough to allow people to get out of the mud, because this planet belongs to all of us, and no one should be buried alive on permanent in the past, especially when in question houses on which the entire Western Hemisphere was building upon. I'm not going to find it ever cultural enough, respectful enough, and civil enough, if not respectful to its roots, and if not rooted in its attempt to develop further. People are just, I think, before solving in mathematics, as in everywhere, in any science, before you start resolving the problem, it is very important to set the problem correctly. It's critically important that you recognize and set the problem correctly, and then you deal with the problem. It is true that in England become too much under attack of Muslims, and I have found today Muslims jumping way too much over our Orthodox territories, because this tribunal, that Celtic tribunal society, at some earlier time found themselves in some kind of admiration to or alignment with Jewish easiness, should I call it, easygoingness, to use it as prolonged hand to control the region. I have to notice that there is some kind of alignment here happening in how ready Western politics is, how far Western politics is ready to align much more with Muslim politics than with Orthodox. And that has become now the downfall of such international American politics and English politics is enormous supply, enormous marching of Muslim population in Little England territory. Instead to align with the real roots of English monarchy, which is rather Serbia, they are aligning with Muslim territories. And that is the main mistake that England is doing since the beginning of last century for some reasons. Probably Lawrence of Olivier here was playing a bit of a role. Lawrence of Arabia. I certainly have established that there are certain good products within the bloodlines that can happen on the west side. David Bowie, Lawrence of Arabia, things like that. Based on fishing the Muslim territories. And probably because of having what to fish there, as they fished it all, now they dry down these territories, and obviously created some kind of infrastructure, some kind of bridging with Muslim territories. It's very hard for them to close them now. I think they opened them a lot in last century. It makes us to think that England can make very good interface out of Muslim cultures. But I would now return to Muslim territories and try to make sense out of their being there, because there are billions living there, and England is too little to absorb that much of Muslims. I think that we have bring much more Orthodox in England to recover that kind of European Renaissance, which Muslims do not have in their DNA. I think that we need to return everything on Muslim territories and allow these territories to be much more returning to nature and natural lifestyle, which is anyway becoming a fashion. And to make England much more professional diplomatic center and political center, civilization as planetary rather, something as Council and Office of the United Nations. So Muslims, I would ask Muslims actually to allow that to happen, because there is enough substantial historic heritage on that territory, and everyone would think that to make the best use of it would be the wisest solution. And it would work even if there is a success story of Muslim heritage. It would work that we reflect in better terms on Muslim territories as well. But it is time that we see them now, I would say, returning to homelands and trying to bring their presence in much more engaged and free lifestyle there. I think we should be all fighting for liberating of Muslim people on their own territories, a Muslim wife, kids, things like that. Further promoting of development of Middle East and liberating European countries from such kind of pressures, so they can be much more engaged in counseling the planets and directing the development in terms of continuing West continuing to be that kind of Renaissance center for the planet, and bringing something of that on the rest of the continents, rather than suffocating it there and losing it gradually. Everyone should be, I would be suggesting, to be convinced that suffocating the European Renaissance is not going to work for anyone, but allowing to re-emerge in its 21st century, and focusing on development in other territories, as it is happening in China, happening in India, gradually, even in Africa, gradually, and even in Middle East. Look what's happening in Saudi Arabia. Miracles. So focusing on development in the territories, with Muslims engaging on their territories, making miracles as Chinese are doing it, as in India gradually, and as Saudi Arabians are doing it. Making that miracle in Middle East, of their own homeland, is going to be much more promotional for all of the Muslims than trying to hide in a little squadron called England. I still have problem to understand. I mean, I think I answered it. They have been fishing Middle East. They have been fishing David Bowie's and the likes. And they recreated England of Henry VIII, of Anne Boleyn, and everything in the line, or whatever was typical for last century. Let's take a couple of typical characters of 20th century within the Victorian age. It became almost erased by this newly discovered David Bowie protocol or Lawrence of Arabia. Needless to say that certain issues emerged in package with all of that palettes of revamping England. I'm freedom-driven person. I don't want to push things, but I'm not going to say on the spot I'm moving as each of you. I'm just living my life. Although it is in the clouds. I'm just highlighting various issues for a day. And no, I'm not that much thirsty of something. I'm trying to understand it, monitoring it and trying to understand it as each of you. But I wanted to say today, that building reminds me to socialism. Cold, detached, in the way how Princess Diana experienced it. Cold, detached, overruly, scary, ignorant very often, emotionless, cold. Yes, that is how socialism was. That is how my childhood was. Very cold. Super organized, but very cold. And my parents were very cold. And probably I have become very cold for my kids as well. Because socialism made us to be like that. And that house is like that. Also today they are much more modernized. And I think I'm actually also, I feel somehow as a savior. I think that I have to save them actually. But then I'm prevented to do that. And that also irritates me. Because if you feel that someone expects you to save them, then you should actually saving them. Right? Or what kind of Superman or Batman or Saviour that's going to be? If doesn't do their job properly. So that is how I think about that. It is not that I am having desire to be there, but it's more like I think that I need to save these people. And that I need to save Serbia, the heritage house of Serbia, I think also about that. Also, I think that I have to save in such way even Europe. I don't know, I'm constantly feeling myself in some kind of savior shoes in these 15 years. And then end up to be demonized because of that. I certainly took opportunity of having the wings of Avatar and to deliver this communication to the planet. But there is something about England that we should not forget. And that is that approximately very much at the beginning when I started to do this entire awakening, that was somewhere in year around 2010, started to develop in England project of connecting our minds like on some kind of electronic board and allowing communication or stimulating communication or facilitating communication to go directly in between the persons, allowing some kind of telepathic mind communication to happen. However, this was nothing of natural. It was actually very much facilitated and in the same way, obviously, highly controlled by centered one mega computer, one center that basically took control over the entire communication, telepathic even communication, our mind communication, which is the concept of total control. Now, this terminology was quite present in second half of 20th century somewhere from 80s, from 90s, especially from 90s, started to be developed very much that kind of rhetoric, especially about total control, rhetoric of total control. And that certainly was very well planned ahead of launching the computer program itself. I think that in parallel with launching computer program was actually launched program for controlling of mass population. And that is what I would like now to point out in the closure of what we have been talking all of this time, which was predominantly political philosophy. I have not devoted too much attention to AI because I felt that we need to understand the ground as much as it becomes still very much foundations upon which everything else is just updating. Once we understood that, it is now to certainly not to be forgotten. As I will notice, someone wants to basically provoke my going in England rather than I have been that much aware of it. I'm going to allow myself noticing that that idea has not emerged or has not been born in my mind. It was actually implemented in my mind. And then it happened to be that I accepted it as a matter of looking for some kind of suitable infrastructure to deliver what I found very much rooted in my Serbia childhood, where it would not be out of stretch to imagine that England would be certainly, and rural America would have been certainly attending and following closely the entire development. So it remained to be Alice in a Wonderland for sure for me. And Wonderland is Great Britain and USA. And there is nothing of new, this kind of my attempt to bring my work there. They're just pretending they're not receptive to it. In substance, I think that would be the cherry on the top of the cake altogether for them. Now, what is the cake we are talking about? Well, we are talking about entire concept of artificial intelligence. And in that context, I have to address therefore this mega center that they have created in England for exactly that purpose. For a purpose I have just explained. Total control of our minds. I would not be going there, therefore, to launch my Cinderella project. It would be about them accomplishing their dream. And that is using my mind as a final culmination to their project of total mind control, bringing my mind as some kind of central computer. If not, they have been using it by now as well in that context. And continue to use it or to increasingly develop practices how they are going to use it in that context. And that is why I need to call for global revolution against these people. And against England as a country that allow such processes to happen on their territories. Accordingly, that stage of my work, bringing first aid to humanity, has ended now. We are going to be focused completely now on AI project, which continue to fish flies as usually, or followers. I mean, it is FL, fly or follower, sounds similar, to invest into what they have not made the homework enough to find out what exactly they are investing into. But because people for quite some time have been accommodated to play a ship, that's going to be for them just continuation of playing a shipyard of the planet. I'm calling for revolution. Right now, exactly on this topic. For everything else, we are ready for that as well. But I think the urgent matter is them trying to fish the big fish. And there was certainly a poster when I started to work in that English company. A poster big with introduction and promoting marketing for the movie Big Fish. A huge poster on the entire wall next to the secretary, next to the administration desk. When I got my job in English-speaking territory, it was under that poster, Big Fish. I certainly would have not having any clue that that would be reference to myself. I thought then later on it would have been it would have been about someone in my proximity. Now I understand. That would be probably myself. So it is not that they don't want me there. They're pretending that they don't want me there. Or in other words, it is not that easy to get me there for them. But here I have to make that statement officially. That cannot be one of my wish lists. Professional, of course. Because it doesn't sound and it doesn't look like that at all. Whoever are these people, and I think I have identified them in the category of deep state of America and deep state of Britain, have been the one that have been playing Yugoslavia, creating Yugoslavia and controlling Yugoslavia, that have been known everything that's happening in Yugoslavia and closely monitoring it as some kind of experiment, and they have been fishing it in quite strong zooming protocol. So I'm going to tell you therefore accordingly. Again and again and again, Israel doesn't have capacity to be that much of a devil. Israel is really very troubled country. The very fact that they continue to be controlled by Palestinians, and all of the time they have been controlled by Palestinians, would indicate that they would not have capacity to evolve that much and that much of a controlling factor. Americans, the one that is controlling you is not Israel, but your deep state. And the text that is enclosing Donald Trump, the speeches of Donald Trump, they're not written by Israel. They are written by your deep state. That is deep state. One of the political commentators even named who are the exact protagonists of deep state, these are not just going to be one or two people. It will be more than one and two people. That is protocol that is controlling was controlling all of the Yugoslavia. Project that was initiating the entire socialism revolution in last century. This is conglomerate of people that are undoubtedly interested equally in the top investments and have no problem to play either caught in the protocol or protagonists that would not mind continue to control territories from position of deep state of America, that have been accommodated to great an extent to relate to other territories like that, where now the artificial intelligence come as next step within that kind of devilship that unleash under their roof, and maybe it is becoming heavier even for their shoulders. But they have been so much involved in the previous that it is for them it would be very hard to get out of it. They have become now hostages to all of the previous misbehavior and misdeeds, and that's very dangerous. That's very dangerous when they become hostages to the previous, caught as fishes in different kind of situation. The world of oligarchs obviously is constantly changing, and I can only imagine that the next generation, the one that come next, are more reckless than the previous, more ruthless than the previous. As this planet on the West, especially on the West, easily develops the concept of ruthless, because it really becomes ruthless. And that translates into humanless as well. These are the latest generations of computer developers, people that understand computer technology and are developing it by the size of their computer-aligned imagination. To develop in that kind of a dream, you need to be of the field. That is similar as it was possible for Nikola Tesla to dream about remote transfer of electricity because he was in the industry. You have to be in the industry in order to develop further that much of a dream. This would be computer-aligned individuals that would be existing in that kind of industry. And then they would be thinking bigger and bringing their generic lucidity with them as a mad scientists. And regretfully, as much as I am promoting today intelligence to great an extent is in comparison with working class revolution of last century, my discussion is equally a bit obsolete, considering the fact that today our problem is not working class, but intellectual class. And as much as I automatically, by criticizing working class, I'm somehow highlighting the advantages of intelligent human protocol, I'm certainly facilitating this kind of devilship as it is computer industry, as artificial in this industry developing out of it. There is a category of people, I think one good group of these people are sitting in Hollywood as well, and especially in Hollywood, which continue to hold itself as Olymp of ancient Macedonia have been very accommodated with topping up the planet. For these people, Olymp never stopped existing in Hollywood. For these people, Olymp was Hollywood. And although they have not bothered to really deliver it in the way, develop it in the way how I have done it, they certainly believed very much in the legend, to the extent that they really are driving that Macedonian empire exactly in the clouds. And from there it is very easily to find yourself on the next step, where is Microsoft, where is Apple Computers, which is the top, the aristocracy of computer industry. And it is pro-Macedonian or Macedonian oligarchy-driven protocol. Macedonian oligarchy-driven protocol, which indicates that Macedonian oligarchs or Macedonian empire of Alexander the Great never stopped driving, having the bull, of course, in the center of the events, and the families, never stopped driving on the very top of the planet, and never stopped investing in the most advanced technologies. In last century, Nikola Tesla has not won the field. It was Westinghouse that took over and landed in hands of Donald Trump. It is still Yellow House controlling this world. So it's not going to be that much of a stretch to me to assume that if there is such thing as Microsoft crowning computer industry, and if it is Apple Computers crowning computer industry, then who on earth would be else sitting on this project, but not exactly the same top of Macedonian imperialism without the emperor or empress sitting there? And to the extent that they still want to call themselves Central News, as when I go, or when you put Macedonian news out there on YouTube, the announcement is Central News. They're not saying Macedonian news, they're saying Central News. It's time to confront Macedonian oligarchs and to send them a statement. I'm not going to be the puppet or the centerpiece of your sick, anti-imperial, anti-civilizational status. There is only one question hanging here that will need to be answered. Are you associated with Martians? England, you have your question for today. Yellow House of England, you have your question for today. And also, there is not true that Macedonia do not have the castle of the empire. They have it. It is called Westminster Palace and Buckingham Palace.